Hi everyone, I'm delighted to welcome John Cass, Jim Ewel and Melissa Reeve, three of the original authors of the Agile Marketing Manifesto, to our Marketing Agility Community Meetup group. They're going to talk us through the Agile marketing values. First up is John.
Focusing on customer value and business outcomes over activity and outputs. I used to be director of marketing for a company called OnSource, and that company was a company that provided mobile apps to insurance companies. The mobile app would take photos for photo inspections for car accidents, and then the claims adjusters would take those photos and write the claim based on it, right? And we were in a situation where I was talking with the sales team and also the CEO about their situation. And we kind of had these clients, this was the insurance companies, where we had retail clients and strategic clients. So a retail client would come along and they would say, we've got a gap here where we don't have our own claims adjusters, and their claims adjusters would go out and just do one or two inspections a day, but we do have third-party inspectors that we sometimes hire and go out. So we could use your photo inspectors. We had a network of photo inspectors, about 15,000, or the consumer would use their own mobile app that we'd given them, and they'd take the photos. And then once they'd taken the photos, it would go back to the insurance company, and the claims adjuster would write up the claim. We got to situations where a lot of those customers, the retail clients, if you will, were only just using us for to fill in some gaps. They said, oh, we're not really seeing the value in this, right? Whereas the strategic accounts that we had, strategic customers that we had, they really changed their claims department. So they would take a claims adjuster, instead of them going out and doing site visits, they would sit in the office and they would write claims based upon all the images that were coming back in from the consumers or the photo inspectors. And so they would be able to write 15. So it was a tremendous savings for them. And so that story always really was a great illustrator to me for this particular value, focusing on customer value and customer outcomes over activity and outputs, because we had to go through a change, myself and then also the salespeople and the leadership in understanding that while we'd got this retail customer, the work wasn't finished, and that we had to create more content to explain what the value of the process was. I think that's a really good illustration. So Jim, you're up next for number 2.
So value number 2 is delivering value early and often over waiting for perfection. So what do we mean by this value? Well, I work with a lot of customers, and one of the main reasons that they talk about in terms of wanting to adopt Agile is the marketers are saying, we have too much to do. We're just drowning. We have so much going on. And either the heads of marketing or the non-marketing people are saying, we don't understand what marketers do all day. We need more production. We need people to do things faster. Well, the problem is that they're both right, okay? And the problem is that marketers today take what I would call a very waterfall approach to marketing. When they think about campaigns, it can take anywhere from 3 to 4 to 6 months to launch a campaign. In the Agile approach, we take a different approach. What we essentially try to do is to take an experiment and learn approach where we come up with a little strategy. And if we have a disagreement about, somebody says it should be strategy A and somebody says it should be strategy B, we don't argue about it for a long time. Instead, we do an A/B test. We try this and we try that, and we see which one delivers better results. So we build a little test to test something. We measure those results. We learn from it. If something doesn't work, like we had an idea or a hypothesis about, if we change this, that's going to increase our engagement with customers, and we find out that isn't true. It's not a big deal because we haven't spent a lot of time and or money investigating that. We found out it didn't work early, and then we try something else. So essentially what we're talking about is trying a iterative approach. We deliver something early, we test, we learn, and then we iterate on that first test. And typically we can run 4 to 8 iterations in the time that it takes a traditional campaign-based marketer to run a single campaign, okay? So that's the Agile approach of don't worry about getting perfection, get something out there and test it early and learn through it. Which kind of leads us to the next value, which is learning through experiments and data over opinions and conventions. How many of you have ever heard about the HIPPO approach to marketing? In this case, HIPPO stands for making decisions based on the highest paid person's opinion, okay? HIPPO, all right? Instead of making decisions based on data. I don't know how often that's happened to me in my career. As Agile marketers, we want to make decisions based on data and analytics. How do we do that? It goes back to what I talked about in Principle 2. We create a little test. We do an A/B test or an ABC test or how we're going to do it, but we test things out, we get the data, and we make our decisions based on those experiments and the data from it, rather than making it based on opinions and conventions. Now, one of the best practices when you are doing that kind of decisions based on data is to make sure that you are choosing the right metrics. And in Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, he talks about this concept of vanity metrics versus metrics that matter. And this is an important thing for marketers. How many times 20 years ago, when I was doing some campaigns at Microsoft, we would run these long campaigns, and then I'd get back these metrics that were things like, this is how many impressions the ad had, this is whether people had recall of the ad or that sort of thing, okay? Well, that wasn't really what I wanted to know as someone who was trying to sell more copies of Microsoft SQL Server. I wanted to know how many copies did we sell in the regions that we advertised in, okay? That's a metric that matters versus the vanity metrics of how many people saw the ad or how many impressions do we have on the website or whatever. So the best practice is choose metrics that matter to the business. So let me turn it over to Melissa to talk about the last 2 values.
So the last value, or the value number 4, there's 5, is cross-functional collaboration over silos and hierarchy. And I think that this is a value that corporations and organizations inherently understand. And I say that because we know that if we have an urgent issue, whatever that is, something comes up that we want to address, we'll form something like, I've heard of called tiger teams, or kind of a research and development. And what that is that's saying, let's break the bounds of our current organizational structure, and let's put all the right people in the room in order to deliver value quickly. So even though we intuitively know this, many of our organizations are structured through in a hierarchical manner with silos. And there's a reason for that too, right? We need somebody to approve our expense report. We like to have like-minded people, all the marketers together, for example. But what we've come to realize through Agile is that in order for us to really take advantage of speed and respond to change, we do need all the right people in the room at the time. And I know that this can feel really daunting when we're talking about, oh my gosh, do we really need legal in the room? Do we need finance in the room? Well, I'd invite you to imagine a scenario where that happens. If you had legal in the room and they could sign off on your copy like that without having all those handoffs that Jim was talking about earlier. So our last value is responding to change over following a static plan. Now this had a lot of lively debate in Sprint 2. And a lot of the debate centered around the word plan, because there was a general consensus that not to plan was a risk. Like we need plans, they're important. And yet, especially in marketing, because it can get very complex, we're trying to coordinate with a lot of different organizations or parts of the organization. Again, you heard Jim refer to the number of handoffs, the number of stakeholders, and oftentimes that means that we get into a templated process where things are sequenced, and those can be very valuable. However, they stop being valuable when when change happens and we're not able to respond to plan. So I always think of Newton's first law, which is an object in motion stays in motion. So if you've got a plan that has so much momentum behind it that you're not able to respond to the change, then you have an issue. And that's why we've included that word static in this value, because we're not really against plans, we're just against static plans. And we have efficiency. And what I've noticed with this value is that there's this trade-off that happens between efficiency and effectiveness. And sometimes we have to sacrifice efficiency in order to increase effectiveness. And again, I'm pointing to some of those templated plans or ways of doing things that we've come to rely on. And we've come to rely on them because they are very efficient. And again, sometimes they can lock us into a direction that, that we may or may not be in line with the market. So I just invite all of us to think about the templates, think about the plans we have, whether it's a marketing plan for the year, or whether it's a simple way of producing content. And think about what would happen if we had a market event that caused the need to change that plan, and how flexible would we be able to do? And with that, we have the 5 values of the Agile Marketing Manifesto.